again, welcome back to another film review. Today's film is X-Men Apocalypse, which is the third film in the X-Men prequel trilogy. Rounds off the trilogy quite nicely. Obviously, we learn a lot more about certain mutants in this film. We were introduced to some newer mutants, and yeah, it's a great film. So obviously the film being called Apocalypse, that is because the main villain, antagonist, whatever you want to call him, is called Apocalypse in the film, or known in Egyptian as En-Sabah-Nur. In this film he's played by Oscar Isaac, who is obviously a very talented actor. Recently been in the newest Star Wars film as Poe Dameron, so he's having a good year, bless him. And yeah, he puts in a good portrayal as a villain in this film. A lot of people have slated him for the way he looks in the film, and slightly for his performance, but I thought it was a very good performance considering he's playing a big purple mutant looking thing. So, you know, he did well. So his character Apocalypse, he's kind of survives generations by transferring his powers and his mind across into other mutants, and he therefore absorbs their mutant powers as well, and so each time he regenerates he gains a new power. And this dates back to kind of Egyptian times, like 3000 BC sort of time. So, and that's where we first meet him in the film. He is trying to transfer his body and mind across to another mutant and gain their powers. And for a chain of events, he's incarcerated underneath Egypt for thousands of years. And he's actually woken up in 1983, which is obviously a great year to wake up. Think of all that great music. So, yeah, he does that. And every time he regenerates, he always has 4 mutants with him, which is obviously where they get the reference for a Horseman of the Apocalypse. And that's referenced in the film. Alex Summers says to Moira McTaggart that obviously that's where they got it from. They got it from the Bible. And she says maybe the Bible got it from him, because they can't really tell how long Apocalypse has been around. So obviously we first meet him in Egypt. He might have been around for thousands of years before that. So, yeah, it's a good backstory. The mutants he aligns himself with time. He first of all aligns himself with Storm in Egypt, who is Alexandra's ship. And then we meet Psylocke, who is played by Olivia Munn. Then after that we meet Archangel, who is played by Ian Beale's son out of EastEnders, which is very strange, not going to lie. It's weird seeing him. And the last one they get is Magneto, who is of course returning from the prior 2 films, Michael Fassbender. So, forms a strong little team around him, which is good. And of course that's the main story of the film, that Apocalypse has come back and wants to basically take over the world, destroy the world, shape it into his own form, just have mutants, because he's totally against normal people. So yeah, that's the main part of the film. But of course it's important that we get introduced to the core X-Men in this film as well. So obviously if you know the first 3 films that were made, like the Brett Ratner ones, we have people like Jean Grey, Cyclops, you know, core people, Storm, obviously, like I've just said. But we're also introduced in this film to Nightcrawler, who was in the second X-Men film, and Archangel, who was in Last Stand, which is very strange. I couldn't really work out how that bridged, but yeah. So yeah, and of course we get to meet them, but we also are brought back with people from Days of Future Past and First Class, which is obviously like Beast, Mystique, Magneto, Professor Xavier. And it's quite nice in this film as well, because Wolverine makes a cameo, so you know, it's always good. Wolverine cameos are never bad things, are they? Who doesn't love Wolverine? So it's a sad day when Wolverine finally isn't in films. But yeah, no, it's a great cast as well. That's what helps this film. Obviously the characters are the one thing, but to have such a great cast behind the characters is really important. Because you've got obviously McAvoy's Charles Xavier, Fassbender's Magneto, Jennifer Lawrence, that would be her, is Mystique, Oscar Isaac, like I said, is Apocalypse, Nicholas Hoult is Beast, Sophie Turner is Jean Grey, and that just kind of builds on what was already a strong cast from the prior 2 films, but they've kind of upped their game and brought in some bigger actors as well. And yeah, that should probably sell the film a little bit more to non-comic book fans, the fact that the cast is so strong. Well, you know, comic book fans don't need selling on an X-Men film. It's an X-Men film, go and see it. But I haven't named one character so far, which is obviously the person that kind of stole the show in Days of Future Past, which was Quicksilver, who's played by Evan Peters. And Does he do that again in this film? Yes and no. He he was he was a shining light, but yeah, he probably wasn't the reason to watch this film though. Like in Days of Future Past, he was kind of the reason to watch that film. He was like the shining light in that, and his performance was just so good, and it came out of nowhere, and everyone was really excited that he was in the film. But in this film, obviously, he does a really great job again. It's really good to see him whenever he's on screen. He's always got a funny way of presenting himself. He dresses like a typical 80s teenager. And that's really interesting, but it probably isn't the performance of the prior film, and I don't think you can expect that out of him. But again, he probably was the most important part of this film again, because if you've seen the trailer, I'm not ruining anything. Basically, Magneto's Quicksilver's father. Not that Magneto finds out in this film, but yeah, he's very important to the core of this film. So it was great seeing him again, and yeah, his performance, like I say, it wasn't as good as Days of Future Past, I don't think, because I feel like CGI ruined some of his sequences. But other than that, I think it was a really good outing by Evan Peters Quicksilver again. See, and I touched on it there. My main problem with this film is the overuse of CGI. Obviously, I understand using it. It's a superhero film. You've got to use it because without that, you can't really get the full effect. But I feel like they kind of overused it in certain sequences. Like I said with Quicksilver, something happens with the School for the Gifted, the Charles Xavier mansion, and yeah, the use of CGI in that sequence, it kind of ruined it for me because it was so solely based on CGI that it just didn't seem very realistic. And like I say, I can totally understand using CGI in a superhero film because you don't get that full effect if not. But there's a certain amount to use and there's a certain amount not to use, and I feel like they just kind of overstepped the mark with how much they used. But you know, that didn't damage it too much, but I just found it a little bit annoying that kind of it happened so much. But yeah, it does a good job, this film. It fits into the sequel to Days of Future Past. It's a great third film in the trilogy. There's a little self-referential joke about Return of the Jedi being a letdown. They go and see Return of the Jedi in the film. And Sophie Turner's Jean Grey, after they walk out, said, "Oh, the third one's always the worst," which is either them saying that about Star Wars, or the way I saw it was them having a go at Brett Ratner's Last Stand X-Men film, which I think would be more specific, to be fair, because that was a terrible film. So I found it quite funny that they made a joke about a prior X-Men film in this one. That was quite cool, I must say. So I like that. With a 12A rating, the film could have done slightly more, I think, but it could have, I don't know, it could have really defined itself as a comic book film, the kind of the best comic film of the year, and put itself on that pedestal up there with Captain America maybe, but I don't think it did that. I think it kind of just slipped below that, and it didn't do that, but it was still a great film, like I say, and it didn't disappoint me as an X-Men fan, because I love X-Men, so I would have been disappointed if it had been terrible, but luckily it wasn't. So I'd probably give this film 4 stars. It's certainly not the best of the trilogy, but it's definitely not the worst. I think the honour of being the best will always be Days of Future Past. But it's a fitting way to bridge the gap between the prequel films and the films with like your Wolverines and your older Storms, Jean Greys, Cyclopses. You know, I think it bridges that gap quite nicely because you've been introduced to them now, you see them training to be X-Men, and you know, obviously they build into that. And like we know in the X-Men films of like Patrick Stewart and Halle Berry. I was looking for names there. You could tell my little brain was going around. Like say in the Patrick Stewart, Halle Berry, Famke Janssen sort of films, you know, that builds into that. So that's good. Less CGI would have been good, like I say, but all in all, I think I've kind of walked out of the cinema pretty happy with that film. And like I say, give it 4 stars, so it can't be too bad. I implore any comic book fans to go and see the film, while, like I say, the non-comic book fans I think should be drawn in by the cast that's given by this film and the really character-driven storyline. Because, like I say, it follows the story of Apocalypse really well. It bridges bridges gaps, and it brings in the newer X-Men because of this storyline. But it also doesn't neglect the fact that it needs to talk about how Jean Grey struggles with her powers, or how Scott Summers, when he first got his powers, struggled to control them. How Alex Summers is Scott Summers' brother, and Alex Summers, big spoiler, Alex Summers dies, and that was gutting because I liked Alex Summers. So yeah, Alex Summers and Scott Summers obviously brothers, and he explores that. And yeah, it explores a lot more in depth about the backstories of characters, which is important in a film franchise like this. But yeah, I think I'll leave that review here. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully I've convinced you to go and see it. And yeah, I'll catch you next time. See ya.